as well. So yeah.
Thank you, Jenya. So Redux can be used with React, but also with more things. Reducers should always be pure functions. 68% of people said true, 32% of people said false. So the answer to that actually is true. Reducers should be pure functions. Okay, that brings us to the next question pretty easily. What is a pure function? This one was multiple choice. Nobody thought it was a function that's saving itself till marriage. It is that one. No, I'm just kidding. No, that is not, that's not a pure function, and I'm glad nobody got that. A function that given the same input will always be give back the same output. 68% of people that took the survey agreed with that, and that is correct. All right. For the people who said a function that allows us to mutate and change state, pure functions, one of the requirements of pure functions is that they have no side effects, right? You can write that down. Pure functions have no side effects. Therefore, they cannot mutate state. The way we're using them with reducers, they are returning the new state or the new slice of state, but they're not mutating the old state. They're giving a new one. Okay. Let's keep moving. An action is a plain old JavaScript object. 64% of people say true, 36% say false. It is a plain old JavaScript object. That means it's just an object, right? I'll write in the chat what it looks, an action looks like this. It's just an object. It does come with some directions inside of it. Specifically, all actions must have a type property to it. I'll say some type. And they also can carry optional key value pairs. Specifically, a payload is a popular term that you'll see. This will all be gone over again throughout the lesson. An action creator dispatches actions to the reducer. Okay, so 96% of people said true on this one, and only one person said false. I don't know if this is anonymous, but I don't see it, but that one person is correct. An action creator dispatches actions to the reducer. That is false. Action creators create actions. What is an action? It's just an object. It's a plain old JavaScript object. So an action creator returns just an object. If you go back in your notes and you look at those functions that were like increment and decrement, you'll see that all they do is return an object with the type increment. And then the other one returns an object with the type decrement. So what actually dispatches the actions to the reducer? Well, we'll get into that, but it's actually possibly part of the store. Okay. But that one got everybody, except for one. I don't know who was that one. If you want to say who you are, Marvin, is that you?
I think it was me. I don't remember. I think it was me. Yeah, pretty sure. It was
nice. Nice. Does anyone else think it was them? All right, cool. Well, nice job. Very good. Good details. Okay. What arguments does create store take? Oh, this is interesting. So 20% of people said it was a function. 52% said initial state. 48 said reducer. 8% middleware. And nobody said their favorite beetle. So it takes in, create store actually takes in, and Ringo, what, Samantha? It takes in initial state, reducer, and middleware, specifically called enhancers. We will see that more in the future. I think on Monday, all you have passed in was a reducer into your store, create store function, but it actually can also take in an initial state as well as some enhancers or middleware. Sin Yoko was definitely not a beetle. So That's too bad. Okay, moving on to 7. This is our final question. It said create store returns an object with which of the following functions? Get state, 24% of people. 68 people said dispatch. 4% of people, or that's just one person, said subscribe. One person said replace reducer. It could be the same person because it was a multiple choice. And 16% of people said it returns only a function that can be called. Okay, so drum roll. The winner of that question is it returns an object with get state, dispatch, subscribe, and replace reducer. So it actually returns an object with all 4 of those functions attached to it. Okay, and so we'll mostly pay attention to just get state and dispatch today, although we'll also lightly touch on subscribe. Replace reducer is not something we're going to worry about in this class, actually, at all. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing the results, even though nobody could see them in the first place. I wonder if it's going to let me share the results now. Are you able to see them now? Oh, fascinating. Okay, well.
All right, no, go wash your hands.
Yeah, fuck me, right? Sorry. Unbelievable.
Hilarious.
Unbelievable that you can all see the results now.
Oh my God.
So take a second to scroll through them on your own now that we've gone over the results. Let me just recount. Now that you can see the numbers. Number 1 should have been false. Number 2 should have been true. Number 3 should have been the second one, a function given the same input. Number 4 should have been true. Number 5 should have been false. That one really got you. Number 6 should have been B, C, and D. And number 7 should have been A, B, C, and D. Any initial questions from that? You can just shout them out. All right, cool. So I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to set up our environment before we have these people come in and talk to us about something. And then, how do I close this? And then we'll actually start coding. So the setup I would.
Good job. Keep going.
You talking to me, Deja? I'm definitely
I'm sorry.
I'm definitely going to keep going. And I love the encouragement. Let's via Deja's order. So let's keep going. As you can see on the screen here, we have our 6.4 lecture note document. We are now in Unit 5. So Mazel Tov to you. This is what Unit 5 looks like. Inside, I've already created a couple things. The first thing I've created is a Redux intro. That one doesn't involve much, so maybe you want to get this going for yourself, which is the React Redux fruit stand. This is a React application. So if I were to cd into React Redux fruit stand, we get just our basic React code. All the stuff that comes in when we first make it. So we have our app with all this garbage that I'm not interested in. So you might want to start to run your own. So I know that does take a little while to get going. So start that off, and then also go ahead and make a folder for our Redux intro. So let's cd into that. And this is essentially, sorry for moving this around. this is what we're going to be dealing with first. Let me see. It's hard for me to, I have to set up the chat here. Are we creating a folder called React Reduce Fruit Stand? Okay, so you're creating a React Redux Fruit Stand, Rafid, as a new Create React app.
Okay.
That's something we're going to be building later. So you might as well get it going now while we have this kind of like in-between time of somebody coming in at 7:30. And you can get that going so then we can hit the ground running when we do get there. Outside of that, we're going to look at our Redux intro, which is just in a folder with an index.js. So today we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Redux. Hopefully try to answer some of those questions that we came across in the poll today, as well as fill in some of the other gaps. So to start off, let's initialize a new package JSON with npm init. And that way I can install things like Redux. So I'm going to go ahead and npm install Redux. Okay, so I'll let you catch up. Ketchup and mustard. Ketchup and mustard. Let's see if those people are here yet. I don't know if I'll notice them come in this format. So, okay. If you can just give me, what's that, Rafid?
I didn't say anything.
Oh, I thought I heard something. Sorry, I thought it was you. Who was it? Okay, so is there a way for me to see the hand signals when it's like this? Still trying to iron out everything. Okay, we'll just, oh, here we go. Great. Give me a yes when you've got this, when you're up to where I am.
Corey, real quick.
Yep.
So we are installing npm init, and then afterwards we're installing npm I Redux, right?
So you're not installing npm init. npm init initializes a package JSON for a new project to allow you to install packages. And then you are installing Redux afterwards.
All right, and we're not creating the Create React app as of yet, right?
I would love for you to get that started in a different folder for the fruit stand.
Okay.
Just so that it does, so we don't have to wait later.
Okay, so say this.
Great question.
React Fruit Stand, right? That's what you said?
Yeah, React Redux fruit stand.
So we're just creating a regular index.js file inside of the folder.
Yeah, this is like the same type of file we would have seen in Unit 1 when we were still learning and just doing console log, hello, and running it with node index.js and saying hello. Same type of file. No frills, nothing fancy.
Right. And how do we make a file again in the terminal? That's a silly question, but it's been so
That's
long.
okay. You write the word touch. And
Touch,
then
yes. God damn it, the touch.
Oh, okay. So I am going to stop the screen share at the moment. We do have our guests just walked in. I'm recording. Desktop 2. I'm going to share it. I'm going to get situated here. I want to be able to see the chat as well. Okay, so I've got a bunch of things. Okay. You can all see this project, yes? Nod if you can. Great. Okay, so this is just a regular old JavaScript file. So today I want to spend a little bit of time to dive deeper into our React Redux, and see like what is create store. Because Redux at its heart is really, it's all about the store and what that store is, right? It's this whole application state and everything is getting filters through this store. It's really powerful. We haven't actually learned about closures yet, but for me to accurately teach you about the store, I think it's important to just lightly touch on it, which is that this idea of a function can return a function, right? I could say, let's say I do const and I write a function with adder and it takes in, let's say, some x value. And I want this to return another function.
Oh, Corey, I think you're sharing the wrong screen. I
Am I?
think you're sharing. I see like now I see like a chat and I see like the index.js.
Oh yeah. Okay. Let me stop my screen share and share the right screen. Thank you
No
for
problem.
letting me know that. Desktop 2. Can you see the right screen now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. And let me just check. Okay. I see. I want to still be able to see the chat and still see the managed participants. Okay. There's a lot of little boxes that it makes. Okay, great. So everybody can see the right screen. So I right now I have a function called adder that just takes in one number, x, and it's going to return a function that takes in y, and that's going to return x plus y. Now this code might look really weird to you at first, but let's kind of just play with it a little. Okay. So let's say I write something called const and I say add 5 and I assign this equal to adder where I pass in a 5. If I console log on the next line what add 5 is, what do we think it's going to print? Who wants to answer? Henry, is that you raising your hand?
I mean, I'm taking a guess. It's just gonna return 5.
It's going to return the number 5?
Yeah,
Okay.
because y doesn't have a value, so I don't know.
So, because y doesn't have a value. Okay, what else? What other guesses do we have? Just go ahead and speak amount.
I also thought 5 for the same reason. Like y isn't. Y is just an argument on line 3. It doesn't have a value.
Okay.
What is the exact question?
What is going to be logged to our console?
When you console log add 5.
Correct.
It should probably just log that it takes in the 5. It may be an error because y isn't passed in.
Because y isn't passed in. Okay.
Unless it passes all the way down, then it would be 10. Because x will be 5, because that's what's getting passed in. But I'm not certain what y is.
Okay.
I think
What other ideas?
it might say, because if you put in 5 as the adder, it could be, and then because it's returning x plus y, it could just be 5 plus y.
It's going to be x plus 5. It's going to come back?
No, 5 plus y, because 5 is x, and you're returning x plus y, so you would return 5 plus y.
Okay, so this is fun. We got some interesting ideas going on. How many returns do we see?
2.
There's 2.
We see 2. So what does adder specifically return?
Returns
A function.
It returns the complete function of y. Well, it returns a function.
So adder returns a function. So,
So
if
rather it would
if
just
I'm
say
invoking
function.
adder one time here, why would we get anything other than a function back?
Right.
Okay, so let's try it out. Let's go ahead and see. So I'm saving this, I'm gonna run our file, and we see that it gives us back a function, right? This is an uninvoked function. Now, if I do adder and I say, let's say 6 here, because now I'm invoking add 5. Add 5 has the value of a function. What happens if I invoke add 5 and pass it 6?
You should get 11.
So you say I get 11. That's Marvin, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about that.
Because the return value of, I guess, like adder would be 5, right? Because will be a function. Well, x is being passed all the way down to that second return, right? And then you're adding you're putting 6 as that value of the invoke function, and you're just adding those two together. So it should just return 11, 5 plus 6.
Okay. So,
It'll still return a function because like the function inside is not invoked at all. It's just an anonymous function.
well,
It's not assigned to anything. So
but that's interesting you said that, because I hear where you're coming from. I think that's Jay, right? I can't actually see who's talking.
yeah,
But if adder passing in the argument 5 gave back a function, which we're presuming is this function that it gave back, we're saving that as a variable and invoking that function. So we should be getting the return value of that second function, because it is getting invoked on line 9 here. It just has we've named it. So let's go ahead and just try this out. So I'm going to run this, and we do in fact get 11. Okay, so this is the first example that we've ever seen of a closure. Now, if it's a little confusing and it doesn't totally make sense, that's completely fine. Closures are kind of a difficult concept to wrap our minds around. But the important thing is that even though we've invoked adder on line 8 and given it that 5, it closes over any variables that existed within that scope. So there's no way for me to access that 5 anywhere unless I call that second function. So closures have something to do with privacy, and it's a pass by reference variable. And I know that that's a lot of fancy kind of words, but essentially what we're saying is you have to you can close over it. So I could reuse this in a bunch of different ways. So I could also do const. Let me say I had an add 10 function, right? I can call adder, pass it a 10, and now I have an add 6, an add 5, and an add 10. So I can also go ahead and log. Let's say I pass in add 10, and I invoke it, and I pass in my 6 here. Even though they're being derived from the exact same function, they're able to hang on to their relative variables. So we should see our 16 and 11. This can be written even sexier. You'll often see things written like this: const adder, where it takes in an x and returns a function that takes in a y and returns x plus y. This will do the same thing in one line. So this is a function that takes an x and returns a function that takes in y, which returns x plus y. Right? This is implicit returns. Interesting. Now, let me show you another example of a closure. Let's pretend I wanted to make a calculator. And so I had some kind of const, and I had calc. And calc doesn't take in anything. But what this does is this actually returns an object, and it starts with let's give it a total of 0. Let's start with a sum. Oops, it's been a little while since I wrote JavaScript. Let's sum equals 0. And I'm returning this object. Okay, and in this object, I can write any kind of key values that I want. I can write an add key. That is a function that takes in a number. And this will just return my sum. Here, let's reassign actually, sorry. So we'll say sum plus equals num, and we can return our sum. Okay, so this is a key value pair. Let me try to make the tabbing a bit more obvious to see what's going on. This is calc. This is a function that returns an object where the keys are point to other functions. This is the variable that's being closed over. That's where the name closure is coming from. I'm also going to make a sub key for subtract, and this will take in a number, and this will do essentially the same thing that the other function did, except for it's going to be minus equals num, and we'll also return num. Okay, and then we'll also make a get value or a get total that just is a function that will return our sum. Okay, so take a second to digest this code and see how you feel about it.
So Corey, in order to have access to that add function, since like the return value is like this object with like keys that are these functions, would you do something like, I don't know, like console.log calc.add, because it's an object, or no? How would you have access to these?
How do we have access? That's a fantastic question. So how do we have access over to these functions that are hidden away inside of this object? Well, the answer to that is, well, we can invoke the initial function and save that value to a variable. So example, let's say I say let calc1.
Corey?
And I invoke that as calc, console.log. If I show cal1, we will see, I have a syntax error.
I was gonna say, shouldn't you put commas after the brackets because it's objects?
Absolutely, I should. Thank you for that catch, right? This is an object, key value pairs. I have to add commas. So that was my silly mistake. So let's go ahead and try it again. And we get back this object with this add function, sub function, and get total. You can see that our current sum is actually hidden away.
And then you can key into it, right? Now that you have it assigned to a variable, you can do like cal1.add, and now you have access to that function.
Yeah, I see in the chat that I made a mistake. This should be sum. What's that? So let's try it. So let's go ahead and add 5 to our calc. So let's say I'm no longer going to print this, but instead I'm going to, and I don't even need to return, let's say I don't return, and the only way to actually see the sum is to call get total. So I'm going to say call 1 dot add. So I'm going to add 5. And then I'm going to console log call 1 dot get total. And I'm going to invoke that. Let's go ahead and add something else. Call 1 dot add, let's say 6. So we're expecting to see 11 again. I could do subtractions as well, but let's just try that. So I run this, and we get 5, and then we get 11. So we're only able to use this get method to see this sum. This is hidden away. And so this is another example of another kind of classic example of a closure, which we will learn more about later. It is passed by reference, which essentially means that all of these are keeping a reference to this variable. So even so, our sub function, our add function, our get total, it works because they're getting a reference to what this variable was when they were created. So this variable has been closed over, it's been encapsulated, and it's only accessible through that. I could create a second calc object, and it will have a different reference to its sum. Is this kind of like a class? There's some similarities to it. It's a little bit more private, but there are things like this with classes and stuff. Yeah, good question, Doug. So using this concept, let's talk about Redux, which is what we're really here to talk about today. So Redux has this create store. So today we're going to write a slightly more simplified create store from scratch. So we're going to say const create store. And we saw that this can take a few different things. We saw that this can take a reducer, takes in one reducer. We also saw or know that it can take in an initial state. This will be the starting state. This is an optional argument. If you don't pass it in, it becomes undefined. It also takes something called enhancer, which I'm not going to write out today because it starts to get a little bit more complicated than I wish to go into. But this is enhancer is essentially where enhancer is where we use apply middleware and can pass middleware. Okay, so we still can pass middlewares, and that would happen in the enhancer. So just kind of ignore that, but I'm just having it there to represent really what goes into this. So create store. Create store we talked about in the, whoops, I copied the wrong thing. In the poll, we talked about what are the things that create store gives back. And we said that create store gives back a get state. So I'm going to say const get state, which is going to be some sort of function to do something. We also said it's going to give back a dispatch. So let's go ahead and say const dispatch, which is going to go ahead and just do something. Doesn't matter that we don't know what that something is yet. We said it's going to also return a subscribe. So I'm just kind of putting in this. The code doesn't do anything. I'm just kind of setting it up so that it can do something. And it also does return a replace reducer. I'm just going to put that in here for fun, but I don't think I'm going to implement that today. And so create store itself returns this object very much the way our calculator did, but our object instead is our get state, our dispatch, our subscribe, and our replace reducer. So this is what our create store actually gives us back. And I can prove that to you. I'm going to write a small reducer so I'm going to put this on pause. We're going to build this out slowly. I'm going to write a small reducer for building a fruit stand. So let's pretend we're on the side of the road and we sell apples and bananas, and all we want to do is just sell those so people can buy them and we can just give it to them and they get added to the store. Okay, so we want to just keep track of all of the fruit that's been bought. Okay, fair? Yes? No? I'm watching you. Yeah, okay. Cool. Yeah, you can give me a thumbs up in the nonverbal thing or in the video is fine. I just can't see all of you in the video. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So reducers, I'm gonna call this fruit stand. So I'm just gonna say const fruit stand, and we can maybe use this later. And who can tell me what a reducer takes in? Who's gonna tell me?
It's not. Is it the? It's not the initial state, right? I'm blanking.
Okay, well, reducer does take in state. So it does take in some state, sure. So I'll say state. And what else does reducer take in? Think back to Monday. Oh, Ujwagabasi, shout it out. You're right. Ujwagabasi says action, right? Reducers take in a state and an action. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that. And that's all they take. They often have a default state as well. For now, I'm just going to default to an empty array. So this is going to just hold the collection of all the fruits we buy. And then what is the convention? When I'm writing reducers, what do I usually put inside? What kind of statement? What kind of conditionals?
Is it like a case thing? You do it in cases?
That's right.
Switching case?
That's right, Marvin
Switch.
and Dilber and whoever just said that. Right, switch, right? We're going to be using a switch statement. This is the standard. And so we say case, hey, when actions are, remember, an action is an object. So I'm just going to write actions are plain old JavaScript objects with a type property and sometimes additional properties, often payload is the word. Get used to using the word payload. I know you don't have to, but it is like you will be using it when you use Redux Toolkit. You'll be using payload, and you'll see that it will have a benefit standardizing that. So, okay, so we say action dot type. So in the event that we say add fruit, I'm going to say add fruit. I want to add the fruit. So I'm going to say return. I'm going to do a new array. I don't want to use old arrays, right? And I'm going to copy over our state and go ahead and add our fruit. So I'm going to say action dot payload. So I'm making this as if the action we're dealing with, let's say, look like this. Type is add fruit. Payload is banana. B-A-N-A-N-A. Okay. Okay, so we get this object here and we say, all right, we're going to take whatever was in the state before. And if the action type is add fruit, we're going to go ahead and add the payload. So in this case, the banana. Okay, if we clear the fruit, let's say we say case clear fruit. I should, old habits. I'll explain that later. We'll just return an empty array. And yeah, in the event that something doesn't match, let's just go ahead and return our state. Okay, you should always have a default in these. That's That's the common practice. I'm thinking about doing add apple instead. Like, let's do add banana. Let's start with more general and then move it to more specific. So let's say I do more add B-A-N-A-N, banana. We'll just do action.banana and case add apple will return the same thing. Action. Actually, for now, I'll just go like this. Forget the payload at the moment. I'm just gonna make it really easy. We'll make it more in depth later. Okay, so we're just, every time there's add banana, we add the banana. Every time there's add apple, we add an apple. Okay, so let's go ahead, and this is just a regular function, right? This just looks like a normal function. We can even just play with it a little. We can say, let's just console log an invocation of fruit stand where we pass in, I'll just pass in an empty array. I'll pass in apple here. So it already has apple. And then I'll pass in some object where it says type, and I'll say add banana. Okay. So we've got our, and then let's go ahead and see what we get back. So I'll run the file and we get apple, banana, right? Nothing insane is happening here. Just took in an array. It saw that we wanted to add a banana. And so we copied it over and added the banana. Questions so far? Okay. So this is our reducer that we have. So now that we actually have a reducer, I'm going to pause on our create store. So let me comment this out, and I'm going to first show us how the real Redux store works. So at the top of our file, I'll just do it. Yeah, at the top, let's go ahead and import our Redux. So it's going to be const from Redux. I want create store. And this would be from require Redux, right? Remember the old way of requiring when we're dealing with just Node without Webpack. Okay. So let's go ahead and try this out. So I'm going to create my store. I'm going to say const store is equal to our create store, where I'm going to pass in our fruit stand. And that's it. I'm not going to pass in an initial state. And then we're going to go ahead and log our store. Okay, so the first thing we should see is this object back where we have our dispatch pointing to a function, our subscribe pointing to a function, get state pointing to our function, and replace reducer pointing to a function. So we know that our create store that we've started to put together is on the right path because we also have get state, dispatch, subscribe, and replace reducer as well. Okay, so let's see what these actually give us. So I'm going to do .get state. I'm going to invoke that, and we should be able to see our state, which is an empty array. It's because that is our default. Let's go ahead and add a initial state. So let's say I wanted to already start with apple, like we did on line 74. And I call get state. We should see that it has the apple. This is the optional initial state. All right. Cool, very cool. So let's write that function first. So I'm going to go back up to the top, comment out our create store, and comment back in our create store that we're writing. And the first thing we're going to do is create our store. So I'm going to say const store, and I'm going to send that equal to our initial state. So this is a variable that is going to be assigned to the value of whatever is passed as our initial state. Now, what do we think getState should return?
Should return store.
Yeah, exactly. So our getState really doesn't do much except for return the store, just like we saw earlier. So now the code's all the same, except for now we're using our create store. Let's go ahead and we still get our apple. So things are still working the way we expect them to. So let's talk about what dispatch actually does. Because I know some people thought action creators dispatched it, right? Action creators just create the action. So they're just creating these objects. Now dispatch is pretty cool. Dispatch is going to pass this action to the reducer. It's going to call the reducer. So what dispatch does is it takes in an action of some sort. It takes we've got our reducer here. So let's also just make reducer is equal to, do I have to do that? Let me think. No, I don't actually have to do that. I already have that. I don't have to do that. Okay. So our dispatch takes in an action, and what it does is it calls our reducer and passes, what's our reducer taken?
It takes in state and what was that last? I keep forgetting that last thing. Sorry.
It's okay.
State in action, yeah.
An action, right? Reducers always take in state and an action, always. So we're going to say, okay, state and action. And this is actually returns the new state, right? So this should actually be let, because I'm going to do reassignment. And so I'll say, let's say let store or store equals the call of our reducer and our action. So let's see that in action. Okay, let's first do it with the real Redux. So I'm going to comment back in the real create store. And I'm going to comment our create store out. Okay, and after we create store, let's go ahead and dispatch some actions. So I'm going to say store.dispatch. And I'm going to pass in apple type. Our type has to say, we'll say add banana. And then we're going to call getState afterwards. So our expected state should be apple, banana. Okay? Questions on that? Let's give it a shot. Okay, so I save it and I run it and we get our apple, banana, because it's dispatching it. And then when we dispatch this action and then we're console logging the new state of getState. So let's go ahead and see if our function operates the same way. So I'm going to uncomment out ours, comment out theirs, and let's rerun the function. And we get state is not defined. That's because I called it store here instead of state. I'm going to call it state instead of store, because it's this, we're creating the store, and inside the store is the state. Get state should return state. So that might have been a bad name prior. Let's try it again. Great, beautiful. Assignment to constant variable. Oh, because I'm still calling that store, I'll call that state. Okay. One more try. There we go. So we've essentially replicated this get state and this dispatch behavior. Now, replace reducer just changes the reducer that you use, but I'm not going to go into that. It's like kind of for more complicated projects. You probably won't have to ever write that, at least maybe someday when you have a job. You won't have to write it prior to that. Subscribe. I'm just going to lightly touch subscribe. So what subscribe does is it listens. It takes in a listener. And so every time the state gets updated, it runs these listener callback functions. So essentially, the way those are written is we would have like our listeners. So we'll say let listeners, and it's an empty array. And every time we call subscribe, it will take in a listener, a singular listener, and we'll push it to listeners. So we'll say listeners dot push, and we'll pass in listener. If we want to be able to unsubscribe, no longer hear this one, we should have a way to remove it. But this doesn't have an unsubscribe. So the way it actually works in Redux is it returns a function that unsubscribes by going listeners is equal to listeners dot filter, where L does not equal listener. That will unsubscribe. And this gets run every time there's a change of state. So that's happening in our dispatch. This is when state actually gets changed. So we'll say listeners dot for each listener. We will just invoke that listener. Okay, I know that's a lot of code. That's a little confusing. I'll show you how that actually works, though. So let's say in our case, we add a subscribe. So we say store dot subscribe. Oops. And we can pass in a function, an anonymous function. And all this is going to do is console log our store.get state. So every time there's a change in store, this function will run. So I don't need this console log. And here, I'll make a couple things here. This is, let's say, Apple. And we had clear fruits. Clear fruit. I should have an S on that. Okay. So you can see that there's only, the console log is only written once here, but it's inside of this subscribe. And so with that, when we run it, it console logs every time there's a change in state. So our initial state had an apple in it. When we added the banana, our state got changed. So what we passed into subscribe got ran. So we got our banana. Then it happened again with our second banana. And then we had it again with our apple. And then we changed our state finally one more time. And we got back our empty state, which is now an empty object because we called clear fruits at the end. Okay, I know it's a lot. You said singular listener. Can't it ever take in more than one? Great question, Ujwaka Basi. Yeah, so we can add more listeners. And we would do that by writing store dot subscribe again, and we could say, we could pass in another function that we wanted to run. So let's say this one, I'll say console.log, and I'll just write store has changed. And let's say I only want to run this for the first two. So if we look back at what our subscribe actually does, it returns this function. This is another kind of closure, a function that returns a function. And so I can save the value of that. So let me say let store has changed unsubscribe. I'll just call it unsub. Okay, so now we have a variable called store has changed unsub. Now, if I save this and we just run it, we'll see the same thing that we saw last time, but we'll also see store has changed in between each one. Right? We see apple banana store has changed, apple banana banana store has changed, apple banana. But let's say I only want this one to run for the first two. I can go ahead and invoke after the second one, store has unchanged unsub. And now we'll unsubscribe from that specific listener. So now we shouldn't only see the store has changed after the first two. L is not defined. I've made a mistake. Excellent. L, this should be a function there. Because filter also is a function, right? Let's try that again. And so we see store has changed for the first one, store has changed for the second one, and then we've successfully unsubscribed for the last two. Right, so this is this is the bulk of what Redux is. This is Redux by itself, right? This is just an index.js file. There's no React. There's nothing fancy going on. It's just Redux, which is this pattern. So we've created this store. It takes in a reducer, an initial state, and an enhancer. Now, Redux is nice. It already gives us for us. This is like the heart. This is the beating heart of Redux. But this is what's really happening. We have the state. It starts off as the initial state. We've got our listeners. So every time there's a change in state, the functions inside of here will be called. We have our get state, plain and simple, gives us back our state. We've got our dispatch, calls the reducer, passes in the current state as well as the action. And then it goes through our listeners and invokes each one. And we've got our subscribe, which takes in the listener and pushes it to listeners, but also returns a way for us to unsubscribe. Plain and simple, sort of. That's a little, I know it's a little convoluted. It's a little weird. It's the first time we've seen closures. And then it returns an object with these key value pairs, key being the name, value being the function itself. All right, so that's what create store is. Let's hear the questions. Or I will put on a little poll right now so we can see just how we are doing.
Sorry, can you scroll down to store has changed on sub? I want to see how you pulled it at the bottom.
You want to see what?
How the last function of the store has changed unsubscribe. How did you call it? Okay. All right. That's what okay.
All right, let me launch this poll.
And can I see how the subscribe function real quick, please? I want to see how you return another function.
Absolutely.
Oh, so inside the return, you're calling another function to run a listener's filter.
Yeah, so I'm returning a new set of listeners without the listener that was passed in initially, because it keeps a reference to that variable.
Okay. Cool.
At 46% of people have voted. Let's try to move that up closer to 90, please. Just give me the quick yay, nay. Okay, I'm trying to use the same lingo in the polls. Let's keep it going. We're almost there. I got 57%. Come on, it's been out for over a minute.
You could scroll down for me, Corey, so I can see the ending part.
Sure. So we've got this
Yeah.
create our store. We've got our subscribe that is going to run every time there's a change in store and just tell us what the state is. And then we have this extra one that just says store has changed, so we can see how this does give back a return value that we can call later if we want to unsubscribe.
And then you threw in store has changed unsub, and then it unsubscribed from it.
Right. And that's why in our console, we only see store has changed, those words twice, once for this dispatch, once for this dispatch, but then it unsubscribes, so we don't see it for these following two dispatches. All right, so I'm going to end the poll. I'm pretty disappointed there's only 57% of people. Thank you to those who did submit. For those of you who don't, like, come on, this is class now. This is how I can get feedback to see how you're doing. I will share the results, though, so you can see. Can you see them now or no?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. This time we can. So we've got a lot of nays. Most of the only questions I've received so far is where to scroll. So any of the nays, if you could ask me actual questions so that of comprehension, then I can answer those a little bit better.
Can I see your food stand?
Can you see what?
The food stand function.
Yeah, absolutely. This is our little reducer.
All right. Just to be clear on everything, the get state is the initial state, right?
The get state gives us back the state of the store, always.
Gives us the state.
So the first time we call it, it's giving us back the initial state. And every time we call it afterwards, it's giving us back the current state.
Okay.
Great question.
Hey, Corey, can you go over the switch in the fruit stand?
Absolutely. So our fruits, so the switch specifically, it's taking in some kind of argument. For our cases this time, it's taking in an object that has a type and some one of these. Maybe it says clear fruits. And it's saying action.type because the action is this object. So we key into the object to get this value. And then it's saying, in the case that that value is add banana, we want to return a new array, still with all of the old items in the state. We do the spread operator to make a copy, and so we don't mutate the state. If we pushed into the array, we would be mutating. So that's why we're making this copy with the spread operator. And then we are adding banana. In the case of add apple, we're doing the same thing, but instead adding apple. And in the case of clear fruits, we're just returning a brand new empty array. In the case that none of these match, we return our state.
Okay.
So things to...
I have a question.
Yes.
So compared to the case where add banana and it says return state banana, in regards to that banana, when you have your action in line 61, the payload banana.
Good question.
That's saying, so if you did action dot payload, the value would be banana.
Yeah, that's correct.
So is that banana different from the banana that we're returning in line 67? Like, could you have said return state action dot value? Like,
I gotcha. Okay, so originally I wrote it to be more flexible, and eventually we will go back to that. And so this payload, sorry about that. This payload could be different every time. It could be an apple, it could be a banana, it could be a pineapple, a kiwi, and we could have just like an add fruit property. And so that would actually give us more flexibility. That's the way we're going to move in a little bit after we get this down. This is more hard coding of like the specific cases. Right now, our fruit stand can only add a banana and only add apple. And so we'll have to dispatch very specifically different objects in order to add just a banana or add just an apple. Right now, add fruit doesn't exist and won't work in our current reducer.
so then in what case would it have been that the state, like you're using the spread operator for the state, returning state? Like I'm always confused when the spread operator is brought in, but I don't think that's really my point, my question. When you're crap, I'm losing it. When you're adding the fruit, say for example, why wouldn't I have seen apple, banana, apple if you had called case add banana and then case add apple? Should I have seen apple?
We did add banana.
So I would have seen apple, banana, apple had it been switched.
If this banana was an apple, you would see apple because of the initial state, and then banana, and then apple. That's why we're seeing apple, the initial state, banana, and then apple.
Okay.
It's all being dependent on what we're passing. Okay, cool. I'm gonna comment back out our create store and just go ahead and use the real one. But I'll of course leave that there so that you guys can all have reference to what create store really is doing, which I think is pretty cool. So just to make sure that everything still works as expected. Okay. And I'm gonna not subscribe this anymore. So things we should note. I'm writing add banana like this and like this. All right, so let's simplify this a little bit. Let's go back to having nothing in here and just adding one thing. So I'm just trying to add banana. So we just get our banana, right? So what if I do this? What's gonna happen? Who can tell me?
Wait, what did you do?
I added another N in banana.
Here, well, just return the default state.
The default state.
It will return the default state. That's what I'm hearing. Is that, or do we all agree on that?
Yeah.
I agree.
Okay, so let's see.
I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little hesitant because there's a reason why you're bringing this example up.
That's true. There is a reason why, but don't be
So
hesitant.
I'm gonna go with the contrary, and I'm gonna say it's still gonna print out bananas.
I wish. Okay, it does just return our default state. Henry, and I love that you went with the contrary. I love that. But it does, right? Because our switch statement is looking for add banana, add apple, clear fruits. Now, why does this suck? Who can tell me why this really sucks?
Because a small typo can break your higher reducer, which is why when Jimmy showed it to us, he assigned them to variables so that if you imported it wrong, you would know, and if you spelled it wrong, you would know.
Right. So because I'm doing a small, you said it's going to break my app. Is that what you said?
So that you don't get unintended results. So that way, like you don't accidentally create a typo, and then it could break your. Depending on where you made the typo, it could ruin everything.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you. Is that feedback coming from you or from me?
It's a fan, computer fan.
Oh, that's your fan. Oh boy,
Yeah, for the PlayStation.
lucky you. Okay. So yeah, so it's not working. It's breaking because of a small typo. But why does that really suck? What's the worst part about this?
Where the error is at, you wouldn't know where it's at.
Yeah, right. There's no error. In fact, it's what's called, it's failing silently, right? And that completely sucks when code fails silently. So, because we have no idea why it's not working. If I didn't intentionally know that I put a typo, when I had a big application, we would be going, what's going on, right? So, this is why you'll see that we've made those files. So let's go ahead and I'm going to make a folder here. I'm going to call it actions. And inside of my folder, I'll make my action, we'll say types, .js. And so inside of my folder here, I'll just say like const, and we'll say add apple is equal to add apple, right? I'll do the same thing for add banana, banana. See, it's so easy to do. And then we'll say clear fruits. Okay, and I can export all. I have to do, I forget how to do this. Let's do module.exports. I think I can just do add apple, add banana, clear fruits. And in my index, I can go ahead and require those at the top. So I'll say const, oops. Oh, I'm just going to copy this. And say const, add apple and all that. And we'll get that from requiring from our /action types. Okay. So I've got that. And so now I can go ahead and remove all these quotes. I guess I have to do it one at a time here. That's annoying. Well, maybe I can get clever. No, I can't. Too bad. Okay. So those are now variables, and this will be a variable as well. And so now if I try to run this, we get this big old error that says add banana is not defined. And that's way better because now I actually can see like, oh, shoot, okay, I made a spelling error. Let me fix it. And this time when I run it, now it works. Okay, so that's the big advantage. That's why we want to do those types. Questions on that?
Yeah, Corey, can you just go to the action type JS file for a second, please?
Yeah, so what did we just do?
We're just exporting constants.
So these point to our function.
Nope, this is a variable that points to a string.
Yeah, can you just you said it points to a string, and then can you just
Well, I'm requiring that, and instead of using strings here, I'm using the variables, which represent strings, and instead of dispatching strings, I'm using the variable, which represents strings. That way, if I have a misspelling, it will actually throw an error instead of
Oh,
just
okay.
fail silently.
I'll be after Monday.
All right, so that's the reason for that. It's because of this failing silent property. So then you may have seen that you made some action creators yesterday, or whatever day that was, Monday. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and make, I'll say, fruit actions, let's say, where I will import the same stuff that I imported earlier. Into my fruit actions. Okay, so now I still have those same variables, so I don't want to misspell things. Now, the cool thing here, maybe I should have split things up a little bit different earlier, but the cool thing here is that with our action creators, that's what we're going to create now. These are functions that are going to return actions. So this is just like, we can say add apple. And all this does is return an object that has our type property of add apple. And that's all for that one. All right, let's go ahead and do add banana as well.
So action types are defining what the action is and defining the action itself, and then fruit actions are
so
defining what the action of that action type is.
So sort of. So our action types are, every action is an object with a type. It's required. We can see that in our reducer where we're checking the type of the action, always. Okay, so that's a requirement. And so our action types are just saying what those different types are. Sometimes we want to add an apple, add a banana, clear a fruit. That's what those types are. Our fruit action creators. These are called action creators. These are functions that return actions. So our action needs to have a type. Yeah, AKA objects, as Henry says. That's correct. But we want to get used to the words of Redux. But yes, it is an object, right? It's just an object with this type property that makes it required. So then we can do clear fruits. And this is good because it allows us to make a lot of things fast. So I'll show that to you in a minute. We can do type, clear fruits, and then
Question,
we can
Corey.
yes.
Oh, my fault. Sorry. I see that you wrote the same function. You just named them differently. Is there a way to write this clean or dry? I mean.
Yes. So these are pretty much all the same, and we can write this more dry, and we will a little bit later. I love that you're looking for dryness. I love that. And let's export these. So module dot exports, and let's just go ahead and say add apple, add banana, clear fruits. Right, this is one of the negatives to Redux, is it's got a lot of crap that happens over and over again. And so we can import all of these in our index.js file, fly up to the top, const, import, and that will be from require /actions/ fruit actions. Okay. So now, instead of dispatching add banana with this actual action, we have a function that gives us that. So we can just say add banana and invoke it like so. We can do the same with add apple. So let's go ahead and try that. We'll say, and remember, the reason we're seeing the store each time in the console is because of the subscribe function that we're subscribing and calling get state inside. So every time there is a change, we are seeing that change. So we'll call add apple, invoke that. And we see now we have banana and banana apple. Right, this is a function that returns an object. We can see it here. Any questions on that?
So the function always has to return an object because it's an action.
So these are our action creators. So these functions in particular have to return actions. Actions are regular plain old JavaScript objects with a type property that tell the reducer what to do to the current state. So action creators must return actions. Actions have a type property that give instructions to the reducer on how to update our application state. Okay, so there's the actions, and then there's action creators. When an action gets dispatched, it goes to the reducer. The reducer looks at the type of action and changes the state accordingly and gives us back a new state. All right, let's take a break here. And yeah, let's take a 10-minute break. Okay, so be back at 9:03. I'll still be here if anybody has more questions, but definitely take a break, stretch out.
All right, can you push that?
Yep, I can push.
Thanks.
It's pushed.
Okay, that's doing that.
Corey.
Yep.
Hey, so that cons create store that you created, like the one that's commented out, that's just you explaining how it works, basically, right? But the real, like the initial way is just the way you did the cons fruit stand.
Yeah, that's
100.
that is correct. Our create store is just what the Redux create store is doing under the hood.
Gotcha. Okay, and then that's all just summed up by the cons fruit stand, right? Like right under it,
Which one? Where?
like that. Yeah, right there. All that cons fruit stand.
So this create store is doing everything that this is doing. Lines 37 through.
Okay, got it.
And so with that store, we have 4 functions available to us. We have that get state, dispatch, subscribe, and replace reducer.
Okay.
And so subscribe gets run every time there's a change in the state. And so we're saying we're subscribing to that store. And every time there's a change in state, we just want a console log get state so we can see the whole state. And
Okay.
then we're dispatching those actions. And then we're seeing the state as it changes in our terminal.
So if a third line, if you did store that dispatch like clear fruits, it would give you back an empty array, right?
Yeah, here, I'll do it for you. Whoops. Yep.
Okay. Thank
No problemo.
thank you.
Boom, recording. Okay, and we're back. How did we do on this? Did any of the teams successfully make it there?
Yep.
Yeah, group 4.
Yeah? Awesome. Way to go, group 4.
Whatever number group I was in.
Nice. All right, so let's go over it. So we're making a more generic fruit. So let's just be able to add fruit. So in our actions, let's go ahead and create an add fruit. Whoops. I should have done. And then let's go ahead and have add fruit that we're exporting it. Inside of our fruit actions, we also need to import our new add fruit. And then let's create this new function. So we'll say const add fruit. Should this take in any arguments?
Yes.
I think so. Yes.
The fruit.
Yeah. What should it take in?
A string.
Fruit.
It's going to take in some string, and that string is a representation of the fruit. Exactly. So let's say fruit. And what should this function return?
Another function.
Interesting. So a function that returns a function. What do we think about that? Do we agree with that? Disagree with that?
It
What's
should
the-
return an object.
You should return an object
Return object type.
that says add fruit.
Okay, so
That-
why are we returning an object?
You
Word.
want to return the object because the idea is that we will be abbreviating the action. So you need to return an object with the key of type at the very least.
That's right. Remember what these type of functions are called too, right? These functions are called action creators. So their sole purpose is to create an action. An action is an object with a type property. So for this case, we'll say add fruit. And then do we need to pass anything else in here?
Would it be like a payload?
Payload.
Yes, payload. Right. So let's add this payload. So payload and fruit. Now, just to be completely transparent, payload is a common thing that people write here. It's not required. Type is like the convention, the only, everyone writes type. Everyone and their mother writes type. The convention for this, with the addition of Redux Toolkit, which is something we'll learn later on, the convention is payload. You have to write payload, just like you have to write type and payload. But there was a time for myself too, when I would just have gone like this, fruit. So I would have the key of fruit pointing to the fruit. But I'm going to stick with payload because that's what we're going to be seeing in the future. Okay. And this is often called the payload regardless, whether or not you use the key payload, it's referred to as the payload. Okay, so let's also go ahead and export our add fruit. Great. And inside of our index.js, let's go ahead and import our add fruit. And I'm just going to move I'm thinking about moving all this stuff up to the top. Whatever. And so let's update our reducer to handle this case. So in the case of add fruit, I didn't import this. I have to import that up here. Sorry. Okay, so in the case of add fruit, what do we want to happen? We want to add the fruit. So we'll say, well, we want the same state that we've had, but now we want our action.payload because our action.payload gives us back the value of that fruit. Okay. So technically, I'm going to do this just so you can see it. All right, I'm going to get rid of add apple and banana now because our code can be much cleaner without these, right? Same with our add apple and banana. I could comment these out as well. And then I wouldn't be importing these anymore. Wouldn't be exporting them, I mean. And up here, I wouldn't be using them because I think add fruit is going to be enough. Add fruit and clear fruits should be sufficient. So now instead of add banana, I'll just make add fruit and pass in banana. And this would be add fruit, or I can pass in my apple. And let's go ahead and try this. And we get the same thing, right? But it's cleaner. We have this more flexible action creator that actually takes in the fruit. Okay, any questions on that? Any question at all? Okay. So I think that's as far as we need to go today. I can definitely, there's definitely more, but I think that's a good start. Because the next step for us would be to either add another reducer and then use combined reducers, or to start to use this with React. So now we can just enter any fruits we desire. Henry, that's correct, right? We no longer just have to do add banana and whatnot. Here, I'll specifically demonstrate that. Right now we can also add, let's say our farmers from New Zealand, you know, and it just wants to like add a kiwi or something like that. And we can just run that, and then we've got a kiwi in there, right? If it's a New Zealand farmer. So now we have a much more flexible thing happening. Any other questions on that? Okay, we'll go back. Let's see if anybody else wrote anything. It doesn't even have to be a fruit, Henry. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a fruit. It should be a fruit. Otherwise, because we're writing a function of add fruit. But yeah, technically, there's not a way for us to be protecting that. So let's do the poll again. I'm going. Let's see. How do I relaunch? Where is the poll? Redux check. Okay, so let's go ahead. You should be seeing a poll now, yeah? Yes? No? All right, so let's take 5 minutes this time and do the poll again and see if we've improved.
Oh, quick question.
Yep.
Reducers should always be pure functions, right?
I can't answer that yet. You tell me. Henry, I see you laughing. I wish I knew what it was about. I love inside jokes. I hope to be part of one someday. Kevin Brutus coming up with the poop jokes. Classic. This next song is called The Sounds of Jay Fowler's House.
That's him yelling at somebody. I can't.
At least it isn't me this time.
Oh my god, it's always me. So.
That's why we're making a copy of state every single time, because we cannot make a side effect. What is a pure function? Okay, so we still had 2 people get it wrong, but for the vast majority of people, we got it right. That's great, right? A pure function, same input, always gives back the same output. We cannot mutate state, so that's why the third answer, the C option, is wrong. Somebody did think that a pure function is a function saving itself till marriage. I have a feeling that the multiple choice somebody did that also answered that one correctly. Okay. This one still got some people. An action creator dispatches actions to the reducer, right? So that is not true. Let me screen share again, and we can look at this one more time. So our action creators are right here in this actions folder, and all they do is return an action. Actions are a plain old JavaScript object with a type property. So the action creator is just returning an action. When does it get dispatched? Well, we can see here in our index, store is providing the dispatch. So we're calling our action creator to give us back our action, and that's what's getting dispatched. But the actual dispatch is happening from that store. Okay? So the 6 of you, rewatch that part again. We're getting dispatched from the store and the store only. Okay, but huge, I think before that was like 94% of people said true on that. So we've definitely massively improved. What arguments does create store take? So people said function. Interesting. Let's go back and look at, we wrote create store from scratch. Our create store, did it take in a function? Well, yeah, I guess it did. Let me see. Where's our, I can't see the results at the same time as I share the screen. Okay. So what does it takes in? A function. Technically correct, because reducer is a function. It wasn't the answer I didn't actually mean for that to happen, but that's true. It does take in a function, but that function is the reducer. It does take in an initial state. Everybody seems to know that one. Does take in a reducer. Most everyone. Middleware, yeah, we didn't do that one. We didn't see that yet today. We can see that soon, but that's essentially being what's here with our enhancer. Okay, let me stop my screen share. Favorite Beatle, yeah, right. Okay, Ringo, right? Sam said Ringo last time. Will this be on YouTube or only Zoom? It will be on YouTube. It will come on Zoom, and then I will download it onto my computer and then upload it to YouTube. So it will take a little while. And then we say create store returns an object with which of the following functions? Get state. Just about everybody got that right. We get state from that. Our store, nice. Dispatch, yeah. Just about everyone. Subscribe. Everybody got subscribed. That's great. Replace reducer. Yep. And nobody got that wrong. So fantastic. Way to go. That's a huge improvement. Data driven. Okay. Any questions? Any questions on anything at all from anybody?
Why'd you shave?
Oh, great question. I shaved because I went to Whole Foods this past week and I wore a mask, and I read that it's better to wear masks without a beard to get a closer, tighter fit.
That is so true. Good job. Better than me.
If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, did it make a sound?
Yes, it did.
That's the question.
Sure
Yeah.
did.
It
Can you
definitely
prove it?
It definitely does.
Yeah.
I can prove it by setting up a microphone and then getting a tree
But
fall.
then you're kind of around to hear it.
I'm not
it's
really
kind of
around.
like a Schrodinger's cat kind of thing.
Actually, I think the answer is no, because sound is defined by what's being sent to your ears in a weird way.
Oh.
So if you're not there to register that noise or audio as sound, it doesn't make a sound.
I don't know.
It made a sound, but you didn't hear it.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Somebody says something to me all the time. They speak. Doesn't mean, they didn't make a sound.
True. It's very weird.
That tree, silent but deadly, falling.
Ninja trees.
No, but beards forever. Yeah, I'll grow it back. Don't worry.
Beard gang.
Yeah, the beard gang. Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question, Corey. You said the enhancer was middleware. That's what you said.
That's right. Yeah, I can briefly just talk about that a little bit. So let's say I want to use some middleware for fun. Middleware it works the same way as it did in like Express, right? It's like happens in the middle between things. We can write our own middleware as well. It's kind of written in a funny way. It's because it does involve closures. I can show you an example of some middleware that I wrote in preparation, just in case we made it this far. Let's say I'm writing my own logger. So I write this function here called logger. This is a function that takes in the store and returns a function that takes in the next action, and that function takes in an action. It returns a function that returns a function that returns a function, I believe. So it's definitely kind of weird looking, but we can see that I can console log action received, the name of the and show the action. Console log our old state. I can call next with the action. This sends it to this into our reducer there as our result, and then I can log the new state and return that. And so how could I use that without getting too crazy? And I'm also going to require apply middleware. This is built into Redux. I'm not going to write my own of this because that's a little confusing. And the way something like that works is, let's say I create my store, I make my initial my initial value for my store. I'll just make it an empty array, and then I can say apply middleware, and I can pass in some middleware. So in this case, I'll pass in my logger function that I just wrote. I'm going to comment out where I'm subscribed to the store, right? So without this, here, let me remove this for a second. Without this, if I run the code, we don't see anything because we are only seeing things before because we were console logging here. But I'm going to add this logger middleware, which we wrote. And now, with every dispatch, before this happens, it goes ahead and goes, hey, we're receiving this call for add banana or add fruit with the payload banana. Shows me my old state, and then it shows me my new state. And then it does it again for apple. It says, hey, I'm adding a fruit, this time an apple. this is what the old state is, and this is what the new state is going to be. And again, with the Kiwi as well. So we can do that. If you didn't want to write your own logger, you can npm install, I think it's called Redux Logger. So I'll install that and I will import that. I'll say const logger require Redux Logger. And I can comment out my logger. Did I already comment out my logger? No.
No.
I'll comment out my logger and we should see the same thing. Oops, fuck. Oh, pardon my French. We'll run our node. Middleware is not a function. Maybe I have to take it out like this. Or did I just misspell something? Well, it worked a second ago, right? So maybe that will work. There we go. So it's doing some weird stuff. Maybe it's not supposed to work with Node. I've done this. Yeah, so this is for the console on the browser, and then this will actually give it where it says here like previous state, and then this state is in a specific color, and then the action is done in a different color with the font weight bold. This is the way they're writing this is here. I'll if I copy this here, if I copy that, I think, and I go to like GitHub and I open up our browser, I think if I paste this in, it will work. Maybe I have to console.log. Let's just try the one thing. Does this work? Oh, I don't remember how this works, but it would work in the real browser. It's not meant for that. A more popular, so we'll just go back to my logger, which is made for Node. Later on, we'll see something called a thunk, Redux thunk, and that's good for asynchronous action creators. So that's for actions that use asynchronicity. So like if it has to go fetch something from a database and then wants to send that second thing. That's another pattern, but that's a bit more complicated. We're not there yet. But good question about the middleware. Anything else from anyone? Okay, great. So that's the end of class. We don't really have enough time to do anything. I recommend you looking at the lab. I know the lab is still done in React, Redux, which we'll cover more on Saturday. But you could definitely implement chunks of the lab without React and just do it with Redux from scratch, like the way we just did it. Otherwise, keep looking at how you can do it with React, but yeah, definitely work on it over the next couple of days. Okay?